What is up, y'all? I want to stream today, surprise stream on AI in 2025. There's a bunch of stuff going on right now, and I want to cover stuff that's going on in the last week and what people are predicting is coming this year, and some stuff that I think might be a little bit of hot takey, but a hive mind on some of these things. I think forgetting some obvious things. So let's talk about AI in 2025. We're going to talk about Nvidia's new personal supercomputer. We're going to talk about agents. Robotics, OpenAI is investing in robotics. Anthropic's raising at an insane valuation. Open source models like DeepSeek Chat are freaking good. The combinations of some of these things are pretty crazy. Like take the personal supercomputer, combine it with DeepSeek, and now you basically have a local running LLM that's as good as Claude Sonnet for free. How this might disrupt OpenAI's business model, as well as potentially Anthropic's and all kinds of stuff. So let's jump in. The first thing I think is exciting to talk about is Nvidia's Project Digits and more what this means. So if you're not familiar, this announced last week at CES. Project Digits is basically an AI supercomputer on your desk. $3,000, available in May. And anybody can buy this and run pretty serious AI models right there, either functioning as their computer. This can be your computer, or it can plug into your PC or Mac. What does that mean? It means you could be running, I think, as big as Llama 70B, which 3.370B is really good. We'll look at the benchmarks. Right there on your local computer. The biggest cost by far in AI is just running the models. So if you make an AI product like we do, the biggest expense you're going to have by far is the inference, the bills usually to Anthropic Claude if you're a coding product. That is your biggest expense by far. If you look at a product like Bolt, they basically just take that and forward that to you. You buy tokens at cost and they have you pay for it at cost because you can't afford to offer AI for free. But what if AI suddenly was basically free? We know Microsoft is starting to expand on their Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs. So more of an idea of AI running locally on your computer. Last time I tried to run this website, it was like the slowest website in the entire world. Oh my goodness, it got better. Thank goodness. Oh wow, they got a whole variety of Copilot Plus PCs now made by other makers. They're trying to put more AI beefy chips right on your computer because you're not paying insane cloud bills if your computer's running the AI. Now, I don't think these chips can even remotely run like a Llama 3.370B, but Nvidia's new upcoming personal supercomputer could. So what happens it's going to start with like researchers, right? A researcher is going to be able to have the ability to train a model, run it over the night or whatever, or run the inferencing or whatever. But I do think the average user is going to benefit more from inference as opposed to training, right? Training these days, the LLMs are so smart. There are good use cases to train your own models, but in a lot of cases, like start with the LLM first. And if you run into cost, performance, or other issues, training your own model can give you some very specialized results, which is awesome. But what's cool about this is if you combine it with other news. So the other thing that's going on is let's open up a couple leaderboards. So open source models are getting really, really good. So let's take DeepSeek Chat v3. If I recall correctly, this is a Chinese model, Chat v3. Who put this out? Who is this? Somebody in the chat, let me know. Who the heck made this? Okay, I'm gonna guess Chinese from what I see in the footer. Gov.cn. Let's ask ChatGPT. Who made DeepSeek? Who made DeepSeek Chat v3 model? It's pretty wild because we're seeing such competition in the AI model space. We're seeing new models come out all the time. So yes, DeepSeek, if we trust ChatGPT, which, as a pro tip, I just don't use ChatGPT without search anymore. If I can't cite a source, I don't trust it. ChatGPT lied to me while I was in Japan dealing with visa issues and basically almost made it so that I couldn't attend a conference in February because it convinced me to get an emergency passport because of a visa timing issue and blah, blah, blah. And it actually was all lies. It didn't work. So I lost my real passport. I got this replacement passport. Anyway, so I just always use search now so I can have a fact check. In fact, let's go to the fact check. Pretty cool. Chinese AI firm based in Hangzhou. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but this is exciting. The competition here, what's really exciting too about some of these Chinese models is they're trained on very much lower budgets in the US because of chip wars and having trouble getting the chips that they need to be able to train these things. But what's cool about this, if we go back over to our leaderboards, is DeepSeek's doing really well. So Aider is sort of like a cursor, but in your CLI tool, like write and update code for you. And they have a pretty cool set of leaderboards here where they are running the different models. Let's see, I forget what they're actually using what are they actually using? Someone in the chat let me know what they're actually using for the actual data set that they're running and seeing if the model can, let's see, here it is. 225 exercises were purposely selected to be the hardest that exorcism offered in those languages. Okay. And so it's going across C++, Go, Java, JavaScript, Python, and Rust. So O1 is number one. So O1 was not number one before. O1 Preview was not. In fact, O1 Preview is probably a little ways down here if they did not remove it and replace it with O1. But the most recent revision of O1, so 12.17, doing pretty good. Hugging Face has good leaderboards. There are others. There's a human eval leaderboard over here that's pretty good. There's a lot of stuff here. So coding human eval. We'll get back to that. It's really surprising O1 Mini beating O1 Preview, but it's a production version versus a preview, so maybe you got that there. Keep in mind, none of these leaderboards take into account cost and performance. So are Cursor and GitHub Copilot and all these IDEs using O1 by default? Hell no. Too slow, too expensive. Are most users using O1 by default? Hell no. Too slow, too expensive. I hear people having good results with O1 for more complex things. I have not found those results myself. We don't use O1 in our product. It's just really slow and just similar results as Claude Sonnet. But what's really interesting is seeing DeepSeek Chat v3 show up here. If you use the product Klein, so Klein, GitHub Klein, is a pretty dang cool sort of like extension that's open source. You put in your own API keys that runs a lot like Cursor. So it's kind of like Cursor's Composer that's really good, or Windsurf's, what do they call it? Hold on, Windsurf IDE. They have, I don't entirely know why Windsurf has like this totally separate name for Cascade. Maybe because it also exists in their other plugins. Anyway, it's just a chat that can read and write a bunch of files at once. Klein was really cool in that it was more agentic, in that it would generate code, then it would test the code. It would discover that you have a build command, and it would run it and see if the code passes. Or you have a test command, run the tests. It would discover how you run your dev server, and it would run the dev server, and it would open up a browser. It would take a screenshot, and it would make sure that what it produced showed up in the right place as expected. It's pretty cool. It does that by using Claude with computer use, and it can also use Claude, is it LSP, language server? But no, it's not LSP, not language server. Claude tools, what do they call it? Hold on, Claude server protocol, model context protocol. It can hook into MCP server. So if you've got this sort of agenty thing, this chat, but you want it to have access to the internet, you can install the search with Bing Claude server. You can add your own. In fact, Klein can generate them. So if you want Klein to have access to something, one example, actually, this is interesting. Actually, we could make a GitHub Copilot extension or a model context protocol server for builders Figma to code. That'd be actually kind of interesting. So if you want to be hey, I have this design, I need to add this functionality, we could add a model context protocol server that knows do this when you want to turn design into code. Claude could then know to ping that function when you need to reference a design, pull that in, and turn that into code. That'd be interesting. So you could build your own, you could hook it into our APIs or whatever tool. There's a deep reasoning one, I forget what it is, that does chain of thought, so more like O1. Because as you all know, I don't think O1 is a breakthrough in terms of what they did. It's not a new LLM. It's just they trained it differently. They prompted it with chain of thought. It's optimized for chain of thought. Don't get me wrong. It is trained. It's not just GPT-4o. But you can replicate. I've seen people get pretty close with Claude, which is interesting. Interestingly, Anthropic hasn't put out a new model in a little while. Claude 3.5 Sonnet has been out for a little bit. But the thing about Klein that's interesting is they posted to their whole audience. They used to recommend Claude Sonnet, but DeepSeek is 30x cheaper is what everybody's saying. I don't know where people are getting that number. There's no such thing as an absolute cost for LLMs. It depends on what the cost is for certain hardware. And even hardware doesn't have an inherent cost, right? If I had my own NVIDIA Project Digits, than there is. The only cost is the power. And so I'm guessing they're just saying it costs on AWS or something, or one of these sort of LLM providers. Anyway, they suggest OpenRouter by default. I had never heard of OpenRouter outside of Klein. Seems to push it. I thought Klein was made by OpenRouter and it wasn't. So I don't know why Klein pushes OpenRouter so much. It's fine. It's cool. It's like Vercel's AI SDK, the sort of abstract the models part, but like on the back end, so you like have to pay them. I'd rather have it on the front end in some cases. It's really not hard to switch AI APIs are the easiest thing ever. You give text, you get back text. You really don't need abstractions at all, in my opinion. But anyway, so in general, we're seeing like smaller models continuously get better. So let's go over to this. This is a human eval benchmark. So this is a little bit like chatbot arena, which is humans saying, is this better code or worse code? So take it for what you want. But we're seeing O1s at the top. Again, they cost the most. We all know OpenAI's playing the game of trying to like look the smartest and be the hypiest. They aren't necessarily the best or the most adopted in a sense. Their API does have a lot of usage, but the biggest thing is they do is consumer products. Now, like the ChatGPT makes more revenue than their API. Now, they are investing in hardware, which is really interesting. We're going to get back to that. But here, so Claude Sonnet's always been sort of the leader on like, this one is actually efficient and does quite well. But what's interesting is a couple fold. You see these flat sections. There's a flat section in the middle of all of these. This is sort of a pretty good example of the open source models kind of all catching up. So it's kind of like, let's do some drawings. We tend to see this. We tend to see, if this is sort of your chart and up is good and here are your models, somebody will put out the latest, greatest big giant model. OpenAI loves to do that. They love to do the big, giant, expensive model that's totally unreasonable to use. But what do they get to say? They get to say, we're the smartest. Like, yeah, you're the ones who are being like unreasonable with the cost and time it takes to run these things. But whatever, good job, you're the smartest. And then you have like Anthropic. Anthropic was ahead in a lot of ways, but anyway, Owen came out and there's that whole thing. And then what you tend to find is you get this sort of like long tail of like all the open source models all kind of hit the point where they're all very similar and there's lots of them. Suddenly everybody can train at a very similar competency as the smart models. And then the smart models get a step smarter, and then all the other models eventually catch up to call it like 80-90% of what that achieved. And it's kind of this kind of like step by step. But if you don't need the latest, smartest, most slow, most expensive, these open source models are good. And what's really interesting is we see these small models continue to get better. So there's all this commentary. I've got a whole video on it, on how a lot of these sort of call it traditionally trained LLMs. I made a video on LLMs are plateauing in terms of like you're training these networks. People are like, oh, but O1 and O3, like, yeah. A whole separate rant on how ARC is way overrated and like it's an edge case benchmark, not like a utility benchmark. It doesn't show any usefulness. It's just theoretically interesting. Theoretical interesting is just not interesting to me until you show that's practical. But anyway, it's really interesting to see the small models get better. So when I said like the large models are plateauing, and yes, new reasoning models are coming out, which is not like a fundamental change in architecture, more change in training. There is one interesting part of the reasoning models that I'll come back to. But what we are seeing is continuous advancements in small models. So there seems to be a plateau of what like a typical token output LLM can achieve. Like if you're just spitting out tokens, no reasoning, just like I ask a question, you just start answering with an answer. They seem to be sort of plateauing on how good they can be, even if you make them bigger. You run out of data to train on, you run out of size that you can reasonably, make these things and keep them within a reasonable sort of computational efficiency. But the small ones are catching up and people are getting more optimal. So check out, for example, Llama 3.1 405B and check out Llama 3.3 70B, beating it. Really cool. We saw this with Claude 3 Opus going to Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Sonnet was significantly better, at least in their own rating, but even in evals too. Like a lot of people don't even include Opus anymore, even though that was the big smart one for a long time. Very common pattern. Company comes out with the big model and they come out with a smaller model that's even better. But it's interesting to see the really small models like Haiku. It's not open what the actual size of these weights are. The actual, what is Haiku? Is it a 10B model? I don't know. There was one paper that came out on like people guesstimating these things. But anyway, Haiku being good is amazing. I mean, 4.0 mini, that's pretty amazing too. What else do we have here? I think nothing else particularly small here. Some smaller models over here. I mean, 8B is quite small, and this might keep getting better too. So small models keep getting better. So we have this interesting thing where right now AI products are super expensive. Whether you're consuming them is not super expensive. Like I'll give you an insider info in the industry. A lot of people are selling their AI at cost or close to it. A lot of people are losing money on their AI. Bolt literally just says we're selling it at cost. We're not making money. Others, I bet you Cursor's not making money either. Now they're exploding in revenue, and the bet is the models will get cheaper. They will get smaller. The providers will get cheaper, and you might get to a point where they're literally free because you're running them locally. So Nvidia's $3,000 supercomputer that anybody can buy, any consumer can buy, can run, as I understand it, a 70B model. But 70B models with Meta 2, 3, whatever months later is already better than the 405B. What happens when the 8B model is better than the 70B, and we can all run it locally on our Copilot Plus PC, or maybe Apple finally gets their shit together when it comes to AI, and maybe Apple will finally have like a Mac that could run like an 8B model. As a note, you need more memory too, but if you use products like Slack and Figma and Superhuman for some reason, I have an email client, Superhuman, that will consume like 6 gigabytes of memory. There's a major memory leak in Superhuman, which is supposed to be like the fast, light, sexy version of Gmail. Massive memory leak in that thing. Drives me crazy. If my computer's running out of resources, I check, and Superhuman is consuming more than Figma, more than VS Code, more than anything else. Makes no sense. It reads text and it writes text. Crazy. But anyway, this could change the game a lot, because the thing that's interesting here is OpenAI and Anthropic. Anthropic, here's some other Anthropic news. Anthropic is raising a round at a $60 billion valuation. Now that's huge. To put it into perspective, what is the size? How about this? Can't move. Let's just find another company. The market cap, so the valuation of Adobe is 185 billion. What is the? I'm trying to think of another company that'd be in that range. There are like big, well-known companies in that range, but I mean, I guess Anthropic's probably well-known too, at least among developers, given the whole, it's good. They're good at creating models for coding thing. But some people think this is absurd and others don't. It's definitely a big multiple on their revenue. Where do we see their revenue mentioned here? Of course not. Well, I want to know what it is. I think I saw the number somewhere, but we're going to need the latest number to really know what the sort of revenue multiple is on this thing. But a lot of people are saying, and we're going to get to this too, that agents are the big upcoming thing. And this is the interesting thing. So let's say you are OpenAI Anthropic, and your deal today is selling LLMs over an API. But small models, small open models, and local LLM optimized hardware are driving the value of that to zero and commoditizing it heavily. Then what are you going to do? So what we know right now, OpenAI is working on more like consumer products. They're making a better chat. They're making a better desktop app. They are interfacing with other apps that you have. They're messing around with the idea of agents. Sam Altman keeps talking about agents are going to come. They're going to join the workforce. OpenAI just released a tasks feature where like on a cron, OpenAI will send you the stories of the day or a reminder with, workout and some inspiration of the day or whatever. But what's really interesting is I have something else to show you all. OpenAI is working on robotics. That's pretty interesting in my opinion, because for two reasons. One, I should really make it so you can see the stuff I'm showing you. There, that might be a little better. So one, there's a lot of talk of AI going into robotics. So Jensen Huang, the CEO in Nvidia, did a whole his CES presentation and a lot was on robotics. A lot about training world models for robotics, simulation for robotics, so you can train robotics to move without having to do it physically, which is very slow. You do it in a virtual world. It's very hard to like actually simulate physics that well, so that a robot can figure out its like body weight and proportions and whatever. But it sounds like people are working on it. Maybe it's happening. But OpenAI working on robotics is interesting. It's slightly sus. So let's talk about what's cool and what's sus. So OpenAI and robotics. Let's make this smaller and easier to see. OpenAI and robotics. what's cool is maybe the robotics future is like here, right? OpenAI makes products that ship to consumers. That's awesome. They're chat products. They're models. They do put in ChatGPT right away. They don't necessarily get usage by the average person for the average query, but they're there. They have the search. I mean, they're kind of competing with everyone. They're kind of on this like we're smarter than everyone thing. And I'm genuinely concerned for OpenAI when it comes to robotics because that's so different. Like you can, who is, hold on, Uber CEO? Who is Uber CEO? Dara. Dara was talking at, I think his conference, he's got this good clip of Uber had invested for years, of course, in the software of ordering a car or ordering food or stuff like that. And then they purchased a company, I think it was one of those like electric bike companies or electric scooter companies. It might have been something else, but it was something where the company actually built the hardware and created the hardware. And you had this funny quote of that they were like, oh, these hardware guys just really don't know how to move fast. We're, Valley software people, we know how to move fast and iterate. We'll show them a thing or two. And they basically realized like they knew nothing about like physical products, mechanical, robotics, that type of thing. And it was a huge failure. Their way of working didn't work in that environment at all. And so what's interesting is OpenAI's kind of maybe gonna make the same mistake. Like there's really a question here. Is Sam Altman such a super genius that he can run any type of company, compete with anyone? Can he compete with Elon Musk? Elon Musk is a wild figure. Very controversial. A lot of reasons I hate him that I partake in. I would never want to compete with him on a business. Ever. Do you want to compete with OpenAI for like humanoid robots? Or sorry, do you want to compete with Elon Musk? No. Boston Robotics. There's a lot of big companies investing a lot here. So is OpenAI really trying to do everything better than everyone? I think that goes more to the theory that I've shared before, that they're really not the best at training models anymore. They're going for this hype and this we're smarter, but they're not practical. They're trying to beat metrics like benchmarks and hype, but they're really spreading themselves thin, trying to make these different products all the way from chatbots to hardware. And it's kind of like, I wouldn't compete with OpenAI on a chatbot. I think that is not necessarily the wisest use of time, but going into robotics is just such a different ball game. Like, can you really do both so well as such a young company? Now, Austin in the chat pointed out they have a history with robotics. That is true. Apparently, they invested in robotics, they pulled back, and they're going back in. Maybe the timing was too early. Maybe they realized they should focus on doing one thing well. So Fuzzy Bear, this is on YouTube. I try to stream on Twitch, and apparently it never works. But I'm Steve878 everywhere. You can catch it on YouTube. The recording is there too. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe robotics is a good idea for them. I know Nvidia is investing in making robotics work. And I know a lot of people believe that in agentic world, agents goes really... I don't know how to spell. Agents goes really hand in hand with robots. Because you can have an autonomous like digital thing, right? So the idea that you can have an autonomous worker on Slack that can do code or ask questions or write emails, people can fathom that. But without having any physicality, it can't actually be a worker in the workforce as effectively, right? Basic examples. There are meetings that happen in person. There are coffee chats, whatever. And you could say whatever. Imagine like a remote company. Builder.io is a remote company. If you just had a quote unquote worker that is a quote unquote worker that can talk to people on Slack, it can talk to people over email, it can send pull requests, maybe it gets to a point where it's a full computer use. So it's kind of like OpenAI has talked about and maybe demoed, and Anthropic has talked about too. What if they just, what if they are just using a computer? They literally just, all they know how to do is just click around and they can just do whatever. They can write, they can type, and they can just figure out how to use any application. They're using vision and all this stuff, and they just figure out how to use the app. That's cool. And undoubtedly we will have that. Now, I want to get back to like, is that this year? A lot of people are saying 2025 is the year of agents, and I so disagree with that. I'll come back to that. But of course, people start being like, well, if these super AGI robots can do anything, maybe. we can just have them do our dishes for us and do our laundry for us and do whatever the heck you don't want to do. Maybe you can drive down to the DMV and get my license for me. That'd be awesome. That's probably a while. Maybe you could drive to FedEx and give my package that I need to return. That would be awesome. Like so awesome. So these things really go hand in hand, and there just seems to have been a lot of advancements in robotics recently that really, I think, lend well to this as well. I don't know why I'm in a weird mode. I can't draw anymore. Now, what did I want to come back to? Hold on. There's something here. Oh, yeah. 2025, the year of agents. Let's talk about this really quickly. There's this idea in like venture investing to get like ahead of a wave. Like anybody who's ever like taken a surfing lesson, or if you know how to surf, there's a wave coming. You start paddling, you get ahead of it. You once you feel it, you get up on your board and you ride the wave. But as soon as the wave passes you, there's no wave to ride. It's an interesting metaphor. It makes sense in business and technology because you have to get ahead of waves. So when a wave comes, it pushes you forward rather than, it's an interesting feeling having a wave go over you. As soon as you cross right just too far midway through it, it's just going to leave you. But if you do get in front, it will push you all the way. It's just interesting feeling. So why not 2025 agents? Here's my opinion. And I think who's going to be winning in this is Cursor. And I'll get back to that. So here's the belief. The belief of 2023, 2024 was AI can do stuff. Stuff is a very generic term. It can code, it can help you write, etc. Now, what products are actually getting traction? Let's actually open up. I've got data for you on this. Where did I put that link? If I can find a link. So what is the number one use cases adopted by like real businesses? This is more enterprise focused, but I think this is like, hey, what are real businesses using? Real businesses is interesting in my opinion because it's not just like hobby projects. This is the chart I want. Hold on, I'm trying to make this the right size so we can see it. Oh my goodness, what is up with that horrible sidebar? Okay, there we go. Dominant generative AI use cases. What is number one? Code generation. For those who can't see, this is code generation. Followed by support chatbots, followed by search and retrieval, then data extraction, transformation, yada, yada, yada. In fact, copywriting was actually a little lower than midway down. Image generation is pretty low. Hey, images. Yeah. Like cool that it can do it, but I'm not going to use it. Anyway, there's a lot of AI products people don't use. And so what are the AI products people do use? Honestly, it's like Cursor and GitHub Copilot. Like honestly, like those are the AI products people do use. What else? There's other products out there that work. There's Builder.io, Visual Copilot, convert Figma designs to code. There were these AI writing tools like Jasper, but they're really churny and they don't seem to be really thriving. It's a good example. You would think AI writing tools is a no-brainer. Chatbots is the other use case. OpenAI makes a lot of revenue. OpenAI's chat does great. It's like OpenAI's chat and coding tools, right? IDE, design to code. There's a few others that kind of trickle down. But anyway. V0 is good. V0 is like generate designs. It's sort of like if you said, Claude, give me this, but visualizes it and has a really nice kind of UI around it. Those work. So many other products do not. And the problem is, I think most AI use cases that people want to work don't work well. So agents is basically taking the same technology that people are trying to use for all these products and use cases and failing and putting it on steroids, so to speak. Meaning any problem magnifies. Because an agent, there's two ways to look at an agent. So you can look at it from the user point of view. It's something that'll just do something end to end and just accomplish a task end to end for me, rather than like, give me a completion and I have to handle the next thing. And then the next one that comes up as a problem, the other way of looking at it is you basically put an AI on a loop. So instead of like do a thing, LLM completes and gives you something back, instead we're putting it on a loop. So the LLM is making one decision and then the next and then the next. One is this gets very costly, so cost is still an issue, but hey, maybe, DeepSeek 30x cheaper. I still don't know where that stat comes from. I could not find it on the internet, but a lot of people say it. I saw it on Reddit. I don't know what they're citing. Maybe chat, tell me if you know what people are citing with this. DeepSeek is 30x cheaper than Anthropic Claude. But anyway, Cost is still too high to run these things on a loop. Its cost is already too high just to run them in single shot in a lot of cases. But the regardless of how you look at this, when you put AI on a loop, the issues compound. So if you don't have 100% success rate on one task, if you start magnifying that with subsequent steps, the errors just magnify and magnify, and it becomes a big problem. If you use AutoGPT back in the day, you saw that really balloon and be a big issue. Back in the GPT 3.5 days, like this was really bad. Agents are just getting to the point where like maybe it'll work, right? Devin kind of works sometimes. But I think the problem is if you have, I'll call it like basic LLM products, where most are not working well. There's only a subset of use cases that work really well. You're not going to just jump to agents and it's suddenly going to work well. You take this tech and put it on a loop and compound the problems, it's not going to just suddenly work. If we are only like a small piece of the pie is working well for basic LLMs, a tinier subset is going to work for agents. I think people are assuming that the opposite is going to happen. No, agents is going to solve that. No. If you've experimented with agents, you will know in general in software with a technology that's shaky, you want to use as little of it as possible, right? LLMs are unpredictable, unstable in a sense. Not that they're going to crash on you, but that does happen if you use them in production heavily, like our own product. But if they're unpredictable and can give you random wrong answers just any time in the system, you want to leverage them as little as possible. So some things that quote unquote are agents that are like, workflow builders that are like, oh, you have this task and then you send it to the LLM to fill in like the summary of the thing. And then this task, that's not an agent. Some people sort of call that an agent. I don't want that background color. That's not an agent. Or some people are calling OpenAI's tasks. They just released 2 days ago. Is it tasks? It's like AI on a cron, the reminders thing. People call them agents. That's not an agent. That's LLM. That's single shot LLM on a cron, not an agent. People will debate his definitions, whatever. Most people's definition, not an agent. So I don't see taking something that's working kind of iffy and adding a lot more of it suddenly fixing the iffiness. I've never seen that. There are some exceptions I can get into, but generally no. I think what we're going to see is the basic LLM products start getting better. So maybe it being a small subset that are effective, a larger subset, maybe 20% of these products actually start working pretty good. Then some time will pass, and then maybe a small subset of agents will start working well. And so what agents will start working well, what I think those are going to build on top of the products that are already working well today. So I want to talk about Cursor because actually, I don't know if Windsurf has this feature yet. And actually, when people ask me, like I literally see Tommy in the chat pointing out listening tools are really good, like Whisper, Granola, stuff like that. Listening tools are good, actually. AI, sort of transcribe, summarize, those are effective tools. I see people use them a lot too. So that's another good example, by the way. There are good examples out there. But if we want to sort of like imagine, let me step back. So talking about Windsurf versus Cursor. Windsurf, I think, is like an easier product to adopt. If you haven't used Cursor already, don't know how to use it, I think Windsurf is generally like the better go-to. There's one exception. I've been using Cursor because I'm just the most familiar with it. And they actually added real agentic capabilities to their agentic mode. So let me show this thing, because this thing, in my opinion, is super freaking interesting. Let's make sure y'all can see this. Okay, let's make this nice and big. So what Cursor can do is operate on a loop. So the idea here, let's flip back here, is that something that's in, how I mentioned like 5% of things are working well. It's going to be a subset of those 5%. Call it like 1%, 20% of the 5%, so 1%, that will actually work well for agents. And I firmly do not believe in products like Devin. Products that are like, we're going to start over with a brand new workflow, reimagine the world from scratch. It's just too hard to get traction. You need to have something that like is only 1 degree away from your current workflow and adds value, and you can keep building on that slowly. And that's what Cursor's doing. Cursor right now, by the way, I think I heard is raising at a $2.5 billion valuation and has like 100 million ARR. This is like, I'm seeing this publicly. I've heard it privately too, but I've seen it publicly now lately. And that's not an absurd valuation, because a 25x multiple on revenue is not insane, especially when that revenue is growing at an insane rate. You take the growth rate and put a 25x on it, not an insane valuation at all. I get called out a lot for shitting on OpenAI. I'm super skeptical of OpenAI right now. I think O3 might be overhyped. We're going to find out. I could totally be wrong. I might be wrong. Cursor I don't think is overhyped. I use it. I use ChatGPT. I like it. I'm not like it is mind-blowing technology, in general, but I don't think like their tech is so much better than everybody else's. And I don't think it's changed my life. It's lied to me a lot. I'll put it that way. And I don't think it's changed the average person's life. I don't think they're worth like hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever they say. It's a very impressive company though, don't get me wrong. Cursor is pretty dang interesting. So let me show you what Cursor is doing, because I very much believe in the incremental approach Cursor is taking. So at first they had the chat. So in the chat, you would just chat with your code and it would give you code snippets, and you might have a button to sort of like ping this over here at all. I have no idea what AI Sheldon's saying. AI Sheldon says, I disagree completely, and then says what I said. Devin makes no sense at all. I literally just said Devin makes no sense at all. And I don't know what you're talking about, my guy. But anyway, Sheldon is elaborating on the problems with Devin. Sheldon, I have a whole video where I talk about how Devin is garbage, and I don't believe in it. Maybe Sheldon is talking about disagree with agents, but this is my whole point about agents in 2025. I don't think agents are coming in 2025. I think what Cursor is doing is the thing that's going to work. So let me go back to what I was talking about. Cursor started with a chat mode. You would like say some things. Let's just go. I did this really cool HTML2 builder thing. I used the coolest workflow I've ever used in my life on this most recent project, and I want to show people this workflow because it's crazy. It's using Cursor agents plus YOLO mode. And YOLO mode is not as scary as it sounds. I realize like YOLO mode is not what it sounds like. It's not like a toggle and it can do anything. There are filters, there are allow lists and disallow lists, there are context you give. YOLO mode is actually super interesting. But anyway, it used to be chat. So if I said like, add a test, so you used to have to add the context manually. So you'd be like HTML to builder, this really cool thing that converts to HTML. This is our most advanced mode ever for HTML2 builder. We've got HTML2 builder, HTML2 builder.test, to builder JSON. Sorry, I want builder JSON. Okay, that's added. Anyway, the older UIs aren't as good too. HTML2 builder JSON. Great. So you add the files as context, and then you say what you want to do, like add another test around SVGs. So this is a file that converts HTML to builder JSON for visual editing, design to code, stuff like that. Okay. So this is creating a test right here in sort of the chat right now. I can't make this bigger. Why can't I make that bigger? Anyway, but it's not going to apply that to my code. And it's certainly not going to do multiple things at once. So I can go in and hit apply, and it'll know. But then they came out with, so let's move on, the composer. The composer, in normal mode, I would still have to specify the stuff. So I want to go HTML2 builder JSON.test. Great. UI is a little bit better there too. And then I can say add a test for SVGs. And then as long as I specified what files I want to modify, it'll just start modifying the file. So here it's updating the files. It can update multiple files. I had a test and I had code, and I'd have it update the code and test at the same time. This is not new though. I'm going to show you where this is going. So you can see how progressively Cursor's gotten better. Now that was cool, but you see I had to manually add the files and stuff. So let's remove that. Let's get out of here and let's do one more. Create and close changes. And I'm going to go into agent mode. And now, add tests for converting, I'll just say whatever. I'll close this out. So it's not even using the context of the idea. Add tests for converting, HTML to builder JSON for generating SVGs. So now it's going to do a semantic search of my code base. It's going to find the files that are relevant. Did it find the right one? Did it find it? Can I make this bigger? I don't know why I can't make it bigger. But yes, it looks like the correct file. Oh, and it found the tests. Beautiful. And now it's going to do everything. All I give is a prompt. It looked at my code base. It figured out what files to edit. It's going to edit those files. And that's really cool. But, so here's the cool part that's new. The first thing that's new, and actually let's see if it happens now. It's possible it will. Okay. So the first thing that's new is it does what I mentioned that Klein does, which is it looks at the update and sees if the update has any obvious issues. So, in this case, it does this update, and then it checks for lint errors. So lint errors is it's checking in the IDE. Is the IDE saying the code is broken? Because that used to be a thing. You call this agent mode, and it generates code, But then the code is obviously broken. Like the IDE is saying like this TypeScript is, and lint, by the way, is not just like ESLint. It could be the TypeScript compiler. It's anything that's giving you overlay saying there's a problem. And what's cool is if you've ever noticed yourself, you can copy and paste those errors into the chat and say, fix this. But you find that you're almost like a robot. AI is doing the work and you're the robot. You're just like copy, paste, copy, paste. You feel like a servant to the AI. Now it'll check if there's linter errors. So let's do something more sophisticated. Let's actually add some functionality and say, what do I want to do? I want to do something about SVGs because I feel like that can get really nuanced. Add the ability to parse SVG animations to Builder. It's kind of an advanced thing. We'll see what happens. But what's cool is if it generates code that is invalid, it'll automatically fix it. And again, invalid is just what your IDE says. So the IDE is already configured to be sort of like safe here. But this is sort of the agent approach. This is what Devin does too, but this is useful because it's right in my IDE. It's right in my environment. And I can still be in the driver's seat and I can stop it if something looks wrong and I can have it still autocomplete. Like this is a great tool set. Everything from the basic autocomplete, tap to complete, all the way to just generating things and testing everything. So what's interesting here though is, and hopefully we'll get some kind of error in this case, but what's interesting is I made this project called MicroAgent before that just noticed that, oh, here we go. So it found lints, it found issues. So it found problems with the TypeScript, and then it's going to go and it's going to fix those problems. And it's going to iterate until they're fixed. That is freaking awesome. And that's out of the box. Don't have to do anything for that. I'm going to show you something else. You have to tweak a setting that tries to sound dangerous. Good, it's finding issues. So create text element is defined but never used, and it's going to fix it. So this is a good example of putting AI on a loop, and it's self-correcting. That's awesome. That is agentic by almost anybody's definition. Awesome. And I've seen this work well. Like sometimes I've seen that we've done our own testing at Builder with like Figma to code style use cases where you can take a dumber model and put it on a loop where it evaluates itself, or you evaluate the code, you find the errors and the model corrects the errors. And you can use a smaller model, sometimes so much smaller that a small model on a loop is faster than a big model just single shot outputting. That's been super interesting. And anyway, it keeps going until, do we get the big green check? No lint errors. So corrected the code until the code works. Awesome. And so this is cool, but let me show you when it gets way cooler. It gets way cooler when you can actually give it a command that it can run to test itself. So let's do that. So if we go over to cursor settings, let's X out of this, and you could go to, where is it, general? I get lost in cursor settings. I don't know why. It shouldn't be in models. That wouldn't make sense. It's got to be here. There we go. Okay. So I used to have this off because it sounds scary. YOLO mode sounds terrifying. Oh, by the way, John points out Cursor uses a lot of tokens. You're right. Cursor's using a lot of tokens. Thank goodness it's only $20 a month. You get that safety. I've heard people use Klein, and sometimes they consume a lot of tokens. Klein is less efficient, by the way. It's very impressive. It's not always the most efficient. It will reprompt more than it needs to. Like it'll do a whole prompt and whole output like on a per file basis. Anyway, I like that Cursor is $20 a month no matter how much I use it. That's nice. Anyway, YOLO mode sounds terrifying. It is actually not, because I had no idea, but I was like, one day I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And then it does this and you're like, it's going to run anything on my computer. But then it's like, oh, you can give it a prompt. Like what? Like, because this is something that, is it Windsurf? At least one of the other tools has like, oh no, it's Klein. Klein has a mode like this that it'll decide what's safe to run or not, based on what seems safe, like a CD command safe, rmrf / not safe, right? So it'll use its own decision making. What's nice with Cursor is you can give it some guidance. Maybe you can with Klein too, and I haven't seen it, but with Cursor you can give it some guidance. So what do I want it to run? I just want it to run tests. Run tests anytime you want. And what's really cool, and also you can literally have an allow list and deny list and delete file protection. That's interesting. Oh, it enables the agent from deleting files automatically. I'm actually okay with deleting files. I use Git, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of cases where it does a refactor and it needs to delete a file. I feel like it's too cautious around that, so I won't check that. Anyway, Your IDE, by the way, also keeps track of files, even if you're not Git tracked. VS Code is a way of recovering files that were deleted, at least if it happened through the IDE. But anyway, so let's go back here and run. We can just say run the tests. If they pass, great. If they fail, fix them. So what's cool is, let's hope the tests fail. I can go in and maybe edit the code to make a test fail. But this is cool. It figured out the command on its own. Awesome. Because it does the semantic search, it found that we're in the API directory, it has its own package.json file. Here's the test command, and it knows how to scope down to the one file. Awesome. And here we go. Okay, we got it. The test failed. A little hard to see here because for some ungodly reason, I cannot make this window wider. Maybe I'll zoom out for a second. Why can't I make it wider? Okay. Oh, I know what I can do, actually. Hold on. I know what I can do. I can make the whole thing wider and move it. It's a minimum size for the code. There we go. Okay. There we go. So it saw the test fail. It made a correction. It ran lint past. It failed the test again. It's going to continue. So I made that microagent project. I think that project is now obsolete because of this. That's great because I don't have time to maintain that thing anyway. It will continue. So this is awesome. Like, I didn't used to write tests when using AI enough. Now I religiously write tests if it's something that makes sense for testing. I don't write a lot of tests for React components. I do for like parsing logic, stuff like that. So more and more, I'm just in the, command pilot seat telling the AI, add a test, add the code, tweak the code until the test passes. And here it goes. So now I found lint issues. So it made an update to pass the test. It first finds the lint issue. It fixes the lint issues. Those could be just broken code, type checks not passing, other requirements. And here we go. It's going to iterate until the test pass. It'll run for up to 20, I think, iterations, and it'll eventually warn you. But YOLO mode is way better than I thought. Just having it run test and iterate until the test passes is amazing. And I get so much confidence. Like if I just told AI, make this HTML to Builder.JSON parsing code, and I just hoped, but if I could have it write the test, and I can look at the test, and I can modify the test too. I found like one issue with tests at one point. Like sometimes if it goes on an infinite loop, you should double check that the test is correct. Sometimes the test is like self-contradictory, like there's no way to pass one test and the other one at the same time. I've seen extreme edge cases where it tries to hard code ways to, whatever. I haven't seen that with Cursor though. That was back with my microagent project. But anyway, this is awesome. Like this is agentic coding. And I'm doing nothing. And when it works, I know the test cases pass. Can it make its own commits? No. And I'm kind of glad. I mean, it can auto-generate a commit message. You can pop the panel out on the right. Whoop. And go over here and just go bam, make a git message, and it's pretty awesome. It does pretty well. Let's see how it does. There we go. Wow. Update SVG, HTML builder, JSON, SVG groups and transformations. Awesome. It's pretty cool. And let's go back to our fun we were having over here. This is the best workflow with AI I've ever used. And this is totally agentic. I do not believe in Devin. Like Devin's going to make a whole new workflow and it's just going to get better. Like the thing you learn in creating startups, if you have at least like even I think mild success with it, is that you have to take things step by step. I've done a few startups, and the number one thing that I found in a lot of them is you can build in the dark for a long time. You're like perfect solution and hope that you'll bring it full circle and people love your product and want to use it. That almost never works. What works really well is find a very minimal solution. There are a lot of words that are very, very true and they get overused as a result and people use them wrong. Things like agile development, which really to a lot of people means like small waterfalls. Or as opposed to what it's supposed to be is like literally like constant obsession with customer feedback and iteration, etc. Or MVP. Like I have learned over time that there is like some people are like genius at MVPs, like truly find. It takes insane cleverness and creativity and engineering feats to figure out what is actually a very small problem that'll solve a real issue for real people. And then what you do is you start building on that. You have a vision in mind, but it's not it can't be too specific. It has to be strong beliefs weakly held. It has to be just like this general area. We don't know what the technology is going to look like. We don't know what the product manifestation will look like. And you start incrementing. And that's what Cursor is doing. Cursor is incrementing. They're making it useful today, and the next feature is useful, and the next feature, and we're getting closer to agents. whereas Devin is not incrementing. The product today sucks. And some people will argue, oh, but it'll get good. It'll get, a little bit less sucky, a little less sucky, and it'll get better. But the reality is you run out of money, you lose touch with your customers, you have too high of churn, you are drowning in other issues. The cursor approach, I believe in deeply. And let's see, is it still, and the cursor agent is still working on writing my code for me, which is actually awesome. There are times where I just set this thing loose and I went and ate some cereal. I just went about my day while this thing worked on it. And there are times I come in and manually fix things and whatever. But keep in mind, Claude is due for another model. Like Claude is due for like a 3.5 Opus or a Sonnet 4.0. Anytime, right? Anytime that could come out. These things will just keep getting better. So that's what I believe in. I don't think agents will be common practice. I think you need to look at the winners today and say, can they incrementally bring in agentic workflows? Let's take another example. If you want to know my opinion in depth, what do we do at Builder and like what are we working on? Here's where I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Like where am I actually taking dollars and investing them with the company's resources? So we'll take a Figma design, and turn it into code as a single shot. Great. And we added, so it used to be like convert the design and then get code in the browser, like download it with an XPX command. Now it's like convert the Figma design and you get this CLI command. And the CLI command runs inside of VS Code or Cursor or whatever, and it's going to find the files it should update, and it's going to make the updates automatically, including design iterations. Like you have a whatever. John asked, can you do the stuff in VS Code, the Cursor stuff? I will get back to that. You can-ish. But I'll finish this. I'll come back to VS Code up here. So this thing will what's coming out in the next couple of weeks is this will start to find code and update code. And in a few weeks, it'll automatically be able to do like very even small iterations. Like you convert the design to code, you commit it, you modify the code, and then design changes. Like you add a button, you change a color, and we can patch that one change into your code. Really cool. But where is this going? I think the incremental agent approach here is, as just like a use case example, is let's say you did sync a design to code and then the design had a small change. Well, that's a good example where we could actually just send a PR on your behalf. Like, do you want a PR for like a big thing? Probably not. But if like one color changed, do you want to just send this straight to PR? Maybe. Like Devin is too open-ended. Devin is like, we'll do anything and send a PR, and it may or may not work. And like you find 90% of the time it doesn't work, and you're like, I don't want that. What they do say is like, use it for like simple front-end stuff. Well, like what is the simple front-end stuff? It's like the design, the color change in Figma, where you like added a button. Like we could just shoot that into a PR. That's kind of interesting. And that's kind of agentic, because behind the scenes, what we would probably do is a lot like Cursor. And this is how our experiments have run. We apply the change, we make sure there's no build issues or lint issues, fix them if there are, maybe grab a screenshot from the dev server, make sure it looks right, and then send the PR. So that'd be a small agentic workflow. Another example that we are personally exploring is if you have Builder hooked up to your live site, because we have an API where you can have a design or use AI to generate things, drag and drop to like, this is like fabletics.com. There's a bunch of these sites, but only some I'm allowed to name because of rules. But anyway, you have stuff you create from a design, you push it to fabletics.com. There could be a Slack workflow that's cool in the future, maybe even later this year, where you're chatting in Slack and you're like, oh, it'd be cool to run an A/B test of the homepage with some difference. And you just like tag Builder and Builder just does it, right? These are sort of like incremental agentic things that could lead to a future where just like any design changes you don't want to do, or like simple implementations of designs you don't want to do, it just does it and sends pull requests. But we're not expecting you to do that now. We still support the CLI flow, pull this down with the CLI, run it inside your Cursor or whatever. We support running stuff in VS Code, all of that. So let's actually, speaking of VS Code, let's talk about VS Code. Also, anybody who knows Excalidraw well, like what is this mode I keep ending up in somehow where like all I can do is move this. I can't draw. Like what is going on? Why? I'm in like a weird zoom mode. Did I like click something? I don't know what I did. I just know refreshing solves it. So what can you do with VS Code today? You can't do what I showed. So Klein is the closest thing. In my opinion, for VS Code, you can use GitHub Copilot. It's good, except for don't use the edits mode. And edits mode is like Cursor Composer, which is the best feature of Cursor. See, Cursor's still working on the code for me. Look at that. It's tireless. It never runs out of steam. It can work for me all day and all night. $20 a month. Pretty hot deal. But that's what happens when you have a deterministic way to evaluate if the code is correct. And that's what a unit test does. It's genius. Test-driven development works. I've never loved test-driven development until AI. Now I suddenly love it. I really should use FigJam. Why am I love Figma and their products. Why am I using Scala off FigJam? Let's use some FigJam. Hold on. Let's go to FigJam. I'll use FigJam next time. I'm nervous that I'm going to show something on Figma that I'm not supposed to. But Klein is pretty close. So let's go to Klein really quickly. Let's why don't we run the same test with Klein? Klein works with any Visual Studio Code. It should work with Cursor as well. I don't think it makes sense to use with Cursor. You already have Cursor. But let's go over here. Let's tell Cursor, thank you so much, but you can stop now. Let's delete all this. And I didn't actually want any of that stuff that I asked for. Sorry. The nice thing about AI is you can burn them out and never use their hard work, and they'll never complain. That's great. Let's open Klein. Let me remind myself how to do this. Klein is here. Okay. Klein comes out on the right side instead of the left side. What's new in 3.1? Compare, restore. Oh, I saw that. Yeah, those are great feature updates. Okay, so the Klein, you can run on anything, kind of similar. So let's run a test. By the way, I get asked to review Klein a lot, and I'm leaning towards not do it. I'm sorry in advance. There's a reason why. I will strictly be honest in my reviews. If something sucks, I will say it sucks, and I'll show how it sucks. I had a pretty brutal review of Devon. I had a pretty brutal review of GitHub Copilot's latest edits mode. It performed very badly for me. I cannot in good faith brutally review an open source project that somebody is putting their personal time into and not being paid for. Now, I think Klein raised some money and is hiring people and stuff, so maybe I can get it. Maybe that's okay. But if anybody knows Jack Harrington's video where he did a ranking, the tier list of open source, I think UI projects, didn't go well. People weren't happy with it. He got a lot of flack. Jack is the nicest, most ethical person in the world. And he removed the video. He apologized to everyone. He got a lot of flack he didn't deserve, but I understand the sentiment. I don't want to be in the same position. So right now I'm not touching pure open source projects like this, indie open source projects. But anyway, so Klein, totally open source. You can install it in VS Code Marketplace. Let's try the same thing. So for our HTML to Builder JSON stuff, have it handle advanced SVG. Have it handle SVG animations. Let's see if I can just type that. And if it's smart enough, this is the most agentic first product. By first, I mean it really tries to be agentic first. Also, it uses your API keys. I hope it's using Sonnet right now. I also have it set up with DeepSeek. My results were not great with DeepSeek. I don't know why. Other people had great results. It might just be me. Well, that's interesting. Instead of doing a vector search, it is doing a glob search rather than semantic. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, okay, it found the file. Good, found the file. But so Klein, one cool thing about Klein is you don't have to be a Cursor Pro user and go and tell it, turn on YOLO mode and tell it to run tests. Klein will figure that stuff out on its own sometimes. It also updates code very fast because it uses diffing. Cursor does too, but it uses a smaller LLM to regenerate all the code with the diff applied. Klein uses a diff format. Yeah, this search and replace format, so it's very fast. That was just a very large replacement, but that makes sense. It does one big one rather than lots of small ones. Let's see if it'll update tests or run tests, or is it over? Did I close out of it? Was that my fault? Klein does not have the best UX. That is not their strength. I think I just canceled the task. Okay, I think I canceled the task. I can resume the task. Okay, I paused the task. Okay. Zachary, I hope I'm saying that right. It says GitHub Copilot is only interesting for their extensions. Some can be very useful. Zachary, which extensions are really useful? Try Graph Engine for Design System. Is that an extension? Tell me more, Zachary. And let's see, Klein's continuing. What I'm hoping Klein will do is, it is updating the tests. That's cool. I didn't tell it to. It updated the test. That's good. Now what's it doing? Okay. I think it's giving me it's concluded. Okay. It didn't automatically run the test. I've seen it automatically do stuff like that, which is cool. Run the build, run the test, screenshot if it's a UI change. Why can't I type? I don't understand the UX of client. Oh, I can type now. Don't know why I couldn't type for a while. So what did I do earlier? I hit this. Oh my God. Okay, the UX is a little bit annoying. I thought X would make this big annoying blue thing go away. Like this thing is the brightest thing on the screen and the least important. This should be like a soft, subtle gray. This should be like half opaque. This is like the least important thing. One thing that gives me a lot of anxiety about Klein, by the way, is that it shows you the dollars and cents you spend per API request. It gives me so much anxiety. Even though it's 15 cents, it gives me so much anxiety because I'm like, that's going to add up and that could get uncontrolled and it could just go and go. And I don't like it. I don't like that aspect. You would think it's awesome. People love it because it's so transparent. I don't love that. It makes me scared. But I'm going to follow up and say, make sure run the tests and fix stuff until they pass. Okay. While it does that, let me check if okay, so here's another couple things I want to talk about today. We talked about a lot. One thing that's interesting, though, is we talked about robotics. Now, a lot of people think robotics is interesting because of Waymo. Waymo is doing well. Waymo's working. Will other robots do well and work? Maybe. Waymo's hard technology. It's not like it's easy now or anything, but I get what people are thinking of. They see the stuff, they see these LLMs, they see the technology, they see the AI booming, they see everything behind it and think maybe we'll get more of this. Hardware is slower than software, so I don't know. But talking about like Cursor versus Devin again, one other thing that's going on is Salesforce is investing a lot in Agent Force, autonomous humans. I'm extremely skeptical. What I hear is they're investing insane resources into Agent Force, autonomous humans, Agent Force coders, Benioff said, we're not hiring anyone because, AI is doing all the work with Agent Force. And then, of course, they have lots of job posts, so people are lying. A lot of people lie in AI to sound smart. The Klarna CEO is this guy lies so much. Trying to I think they need to IPO, and he's trying to sound smart, we don't hire anybody because we use AI. Yes, they are. There's tons of job posts. Or what was it? We don't pay for any tools anymore. We build them all. AI built them all. It's such horseshit. Stuff gets headlines because people eat it up. Drives me crazy. Whatever. Salesforce is investing like crazy into Agent Force. I would buy that if Salesforce was already very successful with the current generation of AI. And I don't see that happening. I've seen a lot of hype about Einstein. All I've heard about Einstein is it doesn't work well. I've never seen anything good about models. They say they train on models. I've heard they're not good. I've never heard any Salesforce is great at AI anything with regard to LLMs. Yet they're just going to be the best at agents. I don't buy it. It's a crawl, walk, run thing. You have to take these things step by step. You've got to go step one, do something simple successfully, and then do something a little bit more complicated successfully, and blah, 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 blah. Oh, man. I got the question, what do you think the next big thing will be after the OpenAI era? By the way, Sheldon is just ranting in the comments. Sheldon, we hear you. We see you. We got you. You should write a blog post. You have a lot of thoughts. I get it. I feel it. But yeah, the question, who do you think the next big thing will be after this OpenAI era? I actually don't know. I feel like we're in a singularity moment right now in some ways. There's just no way to know. I do think beyond Cursor will get better at agentic end-to-end things. You could just tell it to do stuff and it'll do it. And I do think robotics will get better, and there will be a day, I don't know when the day is, that we will have the sort of you can do your laundry like robot. That'll be great and awesome. I think it'll cost a lot of money, like the cost of a car. It'll slowly come down. People will probably invest in it, all this stuff. It's hard to say beyond that, though. I will tell you, there's a lot of things people speculate that I just think are too speculative, and I think are nonsense. Oh, did it pass the test? Sorry, the whole time I'm just blabbering, and Klein is doing my work for me, and my coder robot is just going and coding and fixing and building my application for me, which is kind of cool to see. And this is kind of lovable in Bolt's fix mode as well. But anyway, it's tough to say. I'm actually eager. There's a podcast I listen to. It's going to be having a week of AI predictions. I'll tell you this. Here's the one area that I'll speak in the space that I know. I also have to jump off in 8 minutes here. I have a meeting, so I'm going to be in trouble if I'm late for it. So this is my under 8 minutes belief of what's coming. Right now, tools like Bolt and Lovable and Cursor have shown you could just prompt and build apps. Really cool. Here, I think of it like this. It's sort of a 2x2. So on one side, you can build apps without being a developer. So I'm going to put like Bolt and Lovable here. You can build apps end to end. So like no dev. You build a whole app. But the app has a limit. It's more like a prototype or a starting point or something. Bolt is cool because you can your own test stack. Svelte kit. You can build slides with videos with remotion or whatever. Lovable is their stack, but I think it's because they only focus on one stack, which is like the most common stack, like React, Tailwind, Chat.cn. They do a really, really good job at it. Then over here, and this is like for devs, this is the dev side, you have like Cursor, GitHub Copilot, I think Cursor's better. And this is like, handles real, I'll call it like enterprise, but I mean like, it just doesn't hit a scaling problem. Any size code base, any advanced use case, it works. I'll just call it enterprise. And down here, I'll call it hobby, right? You will only get so far with the tools. I think what's going to get filled is this space. So how do we think about it? One is in this space, you're not uploading screenshots and turning them into code. You have a Figma file, and you need to use exactly what's in that Figma file. Every padding, color, design token, like component, you have to be precise. Second, I think people who are not developers be able to do more dev stuff. Now, whether that's over like you speak with prompts and you have designs, you make it functional, and then you like push it to an existing application. Because if we want to be up here, we have to work with real existing apps. We're not going to build a net new app for everything. That makes no sense. Over like an API, or if you're going to do some type of code syncing process where you make a thing, you push code and back. I think this will be an incremental climb for what it's worth. I don't think devs are going away. I think devs start to focus on more advanced things that are more fun, interesting, and intricate. And non-devs can focus on like the little design iterations, the basic stuff. Yeah, Zachary's saying Builder. Builder does both these things, the API push with AI to the existing app and the code and code sync. This is what we focus on. Like if you ask me like where I'm like, the one thing I'm confident in is that problem's getting solved by us or somebody else. So we are like full on focused on this problem. The idea is obviously unburden developers from design, iteration, A/B test, marketing, whatever, and you can just tweak, push AI, sync code, GitHub or CLI or whatever. And it's really interesting, and the tool chain is working better and better. The beauty of all this stuff is the models keep getting better, the tools get better. We keep growing and hiring people, really smart people to work on it. So there's that progress, which is really great. But this, I think, is a huge thing that will be solved and will evolve our workflows and be super duper interesting. And my last job, I ran web engineering at a company called ShopStyle, big e-commerce company. And my job, we did this big replatform from like a back end to like a single page app with server rendering and stuff. So modernized, this is back in 2014, it's early. We used AngularJS actually, and I wrote my own server-side rendering thing, which was interesting at the time, but it had performance challenges, which was not good for that business. It was an SEO-driven business. Didn't really understand that back at the time. I was like in my 20s. But anyway, I hired a pretty senior engineering team to do this major replatform to modernize their technology, make it feel like a real native mobile app after it loaded, which took a long time. And that was cool. But what we ran into is I had this very senior team, and they built out this all net new, as optimized as possible shopping site that served insane amounts of traffic. And then we learned the day-to-day needs of an e-commerce company. And it's like, change a button, change a color, add another landing page, add a section on the homepage for this one like promotion that's only going to be on for one day, and then you got to take it off. It was like all this really incremental stuff, and the engineers hated it. I would like assign these tickets to senior engineers, and they'd be like, "Are you kidding me? Like we just changed the button color last week," and it's like, "Yeah, the test failed." Like, oh my god. And then the marketing team would always be like, "Oh, let's use Optimizely. We're going to add this JavaScript snippet that's going to inject a bunch of junk into the page to swap out colors and stuff, and like wreck the performance even worse than we already had." And I was like, no way, this is awful. Everybody hates this. The engineers want to work on search, the checkout, the like advanced, like actually micro interactions. They want to make the product good. And there was like never ending requests, like landing pages. And so like the whole idea is like, God, let's just automate that stuff. And if you rewind even further in time, my career started, I was a designer. I was originally a designer. I designed professionally, graphic design, product design, all that stuff. And the number one thing I learned is no developer actually has time to get your design perfect. You design it one way and it ends up a different way, and all the paddings and all the margins and all the colors are a little bit off, and you just deal with it because nobody has time to perfect it. I was like, well, I'll learn to code and I'll figure that out and I'll do it myself. And that was way more time consuming than I thought. I'm glad I code now. I enjoy coding a lot. But what I subsequently learned is I don't have infinite time to make things perfect the way we want them either. Nobody has infinite time. There is, I forget the name. There's like this paradox of like, as something that gets easier, the demand for it goes even higher. It's like, it's related to supply and demand, but it's like the opposite in some ways. It's like, this was back in the day, but when cars got more fuel efficient, people actually drove more, and ultimately their gas budgets went up, not down, because the appetite to drive more was there. Believe me, there's an infinite appetite in technology to do more better, to iterate and learn from customers better, to outcompete your opponents, right? Everybody's doing AI chatbots. Theo launched an AI chatbot. You have to, if you're OpenAI, you have to have the best AI chatbot. There's no way around it. So what do? You've got to move faster. If you could have developers not pushing front-end pixels because a designer could be doing that with the help of AI, and it can integrate with your code in a way that's effective with API, CLI, Cogent, the stuff Builder does, you are going to be happier. Your engineers are going to work on the hard stuff, and you're going to win. If your competitor is putting hardcore engineers on CSS fixes, and you're automating that, and you're putting hardcore engineers on hardcore technology problems, you are going to win. If you can develop faster and you can be more ears to your customers and deliver the customer asks that come up within days instead of weeks, months, years, you're going to win. And there's infinite more work to do to get there. And that's never going to change. And maybe that's how we get to the singularity, is like it's important to not forget that you stand on the backs of AI. As AI tools get better, you get better. And you add like your 5%, 10% on top. Obviously, in the early days, AI added a little bit and you added the most. But even if you're just a little bit, just don't forget 5, 10% better and leveraging this better is a huge advantage. ChatGPT is 10% better than Claude's chatbot. And their models, like 4.0, it's like 10% worse than Claude. But everybody uses ChatGPT. They have wildly more usage than Claude's chatbot because it's just a little bit better. Use AI to be just a little bit better. Use AI plus your skills. Stand on the backs of giants of AI and get better, move faster, deliver more value to customers. I think we will look back on the way we program today and say, wow, that was so barbaric. While people today are worried that there's going to be nothing to do if we move fast, we're going to be like when I first started learning to code and started working on real products, I was shocked at how long it takes to make anything. You can conceptualize an app and wait months for the app to exist. That's crazy. That's such a long time, especially when you realize that most ideas are bad and wrong. And so after you spend the months on it and you release it, you realize that was a bad idea. Oops. Well, what if you could compress it down to a few days, realize it's bad, learn, tweak, you get the feedback, you realize how to make it good. That's the type of thing. That's why startups have an advantage. Like, why did Cursor beat GitHub Copilot? Because Cursor moved so much faster because they were hungry and small and scrappy, and they iterated and they were lean and they just moved. Their velocity was insane. GitHub Copilot was like this big company and they're like celebrating that they did it. They did the thing. Good job. Like, pat yourself on the back. And then like Cursor just started destroying them. Cursor didn't move faster and say, oh, there's less to do. There's infinitely more to do. Anyway, I'm late for a meeting. Thank you all for hanging out with me. This will be on YouTube. You can watch the recording. I might start editing these things down. I'm going to try and start getting into a weekly stream where I just talk about stuff that happened that I want to talk about. If y'all think there's interesting stuff that's happening that it would be interesting for me to do my thing with here on the stream, tweet at me, LinkedIn at me, whatever. But thank you so much, all. I had a lot of fun, as always. I'm going to try and be back weekly.